Hello and welcome to another episode of Books, Beer
and Wine.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So I am Karina.
And I'm Cora.
And today we're going to talk about one of our favorite books including gay characters. And it's After Francesco by Brian Malloy.
Yes.
So this book is very good because of many reasons. Name one.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna talk
After
about
that.
first. Okay. I think my favorite part was that it talks about HIV and AIDS. It's set in the 1980s, and even though it's kind of history, it still is a very important topic, and I think we still do not talk about it enough.
And obviously
Also 80s.
HIV, AIDS is a very important topic, yes. And it's particularly exciting to read about this topic when we are living in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Because obviously this is another pandemic, but you can see the differences
And the
very clearly.
And the similarities.
similarities.
Yeah. So really read the afterword as well. So Brian Malloy addresses exactly that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's this book about? It's set in the 80s. I guess it starts in 1988 in New York City. And the protagonist, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin is how old is Kevin? Almost
26.
Yeah,
so,
at
so
the end of
mid
his
20s.
20s.
So, but almost old for a gay guy in the 1980s.
Yes.
Oh.
And Kevin lost his partner, the love of his life, Francesco, 2 years ago to AIDS.
Yeah.
And while you could think he should be happy to be alive in these times, he feels like he died himself because he lost the love of his life.
Yeah.
And now we are following him through his life and his grief.
Yeah, mostly through his grief and the last month of Francesco.
Because
all in retrospect.
Flashbacks to that, yes. And it's incredibly sad, of course,
Yeah.
but that comes with the topic.
Yeah.
And
so I cried a lot, but it's really good.
It's really good, and I like if there's important topics that are addressed. So definitely a must read.
Yeah. And can I interrupt?
Yeah.
What I also love about it is that even though it's a very serious and very sad topic, and that never gets lost, so the sadness and the seriousness is there all the time, but the author also manages to bring some humor into the story. You are laughing with them, and I think that's something that requires a lot of skill to let you laugh about a topic so sad.
Yeah, and I also think
without ridiculing.
Yeah, but I also think that this is really realistic, because if there's so much tragic in your life, you somehow have to. I think the only way
you have to laugh
to manage this life is to have humor.
Yeah.
And to laugh about stuff, not about the disease or people, but to still be
ways.
funny in a way. When Kevin, our main character, finally thinks that he should change something in his life so that maybe he'll be able to live on without Francesco, something has to change because his life keeps going no matter what. And he moves back to his childhood home to Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think it's Minnesota. And there he finds people and comfort in
it's a support group for,
yeah. People who lost other people to HIV.
Yeah, and who also live with it. I think it's both.
Yeah.
There are a few people. Yeah.
And I think it's the only time that Kevin really confronts himself with his emotions in a stage of grief, like it's like it probably has to be to get out of it, to get out of this circle of grief.
Yeah.
And he meets very interesting people there, and that's another turning point in the book.
Yeah.
Is there a character you like?
Yes.
Very much.
Yes.
And why so?
So, Francesco, I think so. We all only see Francesco through Kevin's eyes, but I think he seems to be. I mean, it's probably an ideal version of Francesco, because
I think we all tend to be that way, to idealize
people we loved and lost. Yeah, I think so too. But still, he seems to be a very impressive person, and so when you think of 1980s New York gay scene, so you probably have a very specific picture in your head, and that for me is Francesco.
He's a fun person, yes.
He's a fun person, the way he dresses.
I see why Kevin loves him.
Yeah, so yeah.
And why people fell for him.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, it's probably Francesco too. He is a very cool guy that we get to know through the various flashbacks in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I also liked the lesbian who cared for Francesco.
I see, yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't have a lot of appearances, but she seems to be a pretty cool person.
Yeah, no, I remember her. And also, I guess, it's just a wild guess, but everyone loves New York in the 80s. For me, this was like, okay, I have to read this book because it's I just love that 80s feeling. And so you have a little bit of that party life and fun life, like you wish you would have. I always wish I would have been there.
Yeah, but also I think what makes it so much more interesting is that it was a time when people like us were
treated like shit.
Yeah, and so to see how these people navigate that life, and so it's, for me it's still, I know about it, but I will never be able to feel that and to imagine how that really must have felt. So I guess we get glimpses at times when we meet people who are
older than we are.
Yeah, not necessarily, but
no.
Just homophobic or transphobic or biphobic, and we can go on and on with that list. But so we get glimpses of that, but I don't think any single one of us can imagine how that must have been. And we also cannot ask the people, so particularly not the gay people, because all of them are dead by now, or most of them. And
yeah.
I think that, yeah. And I think that's also very important about this book, that we get a glimpse into a time, into people who aren't around anymore, because no one wanted to help them and everyone is dead.
Yeah, that's, I wanted to say that there are many things that are very interesting about this book, and the positive thing is that it's set in the 80s, and I love the 80s, so you get a glimpse of that. But obviously, as this book is about HIV, it's not that I enjoy the party scenes and say, whoop, 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 great book because of the 80s. It's obviously about another topic, but it's just a little positive side note, in my opinion, to have that feeling and a little bit of that fun life before this virus came along.
Yeah.
People were carefree and they were celebrating, and I think this community was such a strong community that stuck together, and you get a glimpse of that special feeling, which I think is different than it is now.
Yeah.
The bond between the gay people. So you get a glimpse of that, and I like that. Until there is that other topic that's like a big shadow over the book,
and it's mostly about grieving, but also about recovering from that grief. And I think it's a beautiful story of grief without. So it's heavy, it's sad, but it's bearable, and it's also very beautiful.
Yes, it is. So you should definitely read it and cry your eyes out.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite book this year. But wow, the year is still not so young, but it's definitely an amazing book. So certainly one of my favorites this year, and probably one of my favorites ever.
Definitely one of my favorites with queer characters. I've read so many amazing books, but it's definitely in my top 3, and that's a high rank. It's very, very good. Read it.
Yes, read it. Okay.
So we're finished here, and hope to see you on our next episode.
Yeah, where we will discuss Let's Get Back to the Party. So, let's get back to the party.
Yes. Bye.
See you next time. Bye bye.